Well, welcome to another 50's AF podcast. We are getting into it today. Today is a little bit of a deep topics that we're going to cover, but really relevant to dating in your 50s, and not just dating in your 50s. It really could apply to anything. And I really felt it was important to cover these topics. So important that when I tell you I have notes, you know I have notes. And I'm going to use my notes in the beginning until we get going. So we are going to be discussing toxic relationships. Dun, dun, dun. So there's a lot that goes with that, and somebody might say, well, why is that relevant to dating in your 50s? Well, hello, how can you be successful in dating at any age if you have not healed from toxic relationship? And with that said, we all have our past. We all have our baggage that we bring into a relationship. But if it's toxic past, that's not healed, that's not dealt with, you're talking about a whole different thing. And, it could be possibly preventing you from finding that soulmate because you haven't worked through your past. And then, there's a lot that goes into, as we know, keeping it real on 50's AF, that goes into finding your forever love story and your soulmate to walk through the rest of life with. So if you're carrying a toxic background with you that's impacting your relationships, you may not even know. And that's something we're going to talk about. And first, I'm going to introduce, without saying who she is, but introduce my guest. I would like to welcome Heidi Rain to our podcast today.
What is up? 50's AF. Audience, listeners, so grateful to be here today. So excited to talk with you.
I have been watching Heidi like a hawk. And I am so lucky. I reached out to her I don't know how long ago. I was like, hey, girl, will you be on my podcast? I just saw what she does and how she does it, and her approach is so spot on. And Heidi is an addiction professional and codependency expert, but she does a lot more than that. So just don't bound me. No, it goes beyond that, okay? She basically helps people to help restore peace, sanity, and love to yourself and to your family, because this would also apply to family. It doesn't just apply to relationships. You can have a whole shitload of toxic people in your family. So what I want to do with that is I now want to segue into Heidi. I want Heidi to introduce herself, what she does, and because she's a wealth of knowledge. But with that, I would like you to discuss, introducing yourself more in depth about your credentials, your journey, whatever you want to share here.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful segue. So I think I always want to start with, why would anybody in their right mind want to deal with toxic relationship recovery?
Yeah.
Why would anybody even what sounds fun?
Yeah.
I want to get into people's toxic baggage and I want to help them figure out all their stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't set out to do that work, but I was born into it.
Okay.
I was born into the dysfunction.
So we were just talking, and I didn't learn I was born into it until my 40s.
Mm-hmm. Most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people think I escaped. And that's what I did too, right?
Yeah.
So let me tell you, most people that grow up in dysfunction are high achievers. They're super successful in life. They know how to get stuff done. They're amazing people. They escape whatever it was. They grew up with an alcoholic or an abusive, narcissistic parent, and they think, thank God that's over. I survived,
right,
and I'm okay. Except all of a sudden, they get into these relationships and those old familiar feelings crop up again. Mm-hmm. What are those feelings? Being unseen, invisible, devalued, rejected, abandoned, hurt, used. And all of a sudden we go, how did I get here?
Right.
I thought this was a great partner for me. I thought this was going to be the love of my life. I certainly have worked very hard to become the person I am today. Why can't I master this one area of my life?
Do you find that often people that don't identify that they had a toxic relationship continually seek out a relationship to duplicate their comfort zone of being in a toxic relationship?
So what it is yes, it's the repetition compulsion is the theory.
I didn't even know it was going there.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. And repetition compulsion, John Bradshaw, who kind of pioneered the whole inner child work, came up with that idea where, and lots of other people have, like Harville Hendricks and lots of other relationship experts over time have banked on this theory. And the theory is that you marry or date or become the rejecting parent in order to heal. In order to heal. So what is a toxic relationship? You know, and like you don't even know you're in one.
Like, actually, that was my next question. How do you define a toxic relationship? Because here's the thing, Heidi, I wonder. Some people don't know they were in one because there's a difference between, and can you help our audience understand what's the difference between a bad relationship, what's that line, and a toxic relationship?
That's a great question. So a toxic relationship, first of all, bad relationships have problems.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody comes with their stuff, with something they're dealing with. So obviously you can't escape that. But how I like to explain a toxic relationship is, what is a toxin? How do you know you have food poisoning?
Okay. Okay. Well, you're throwing up usually.
Well,
I know,
so
right?
you're probably emotionally sick,
Yeah.
mentally unstable, unwell. And you know, one of the telltale signs you're in a toxic relationship is you ask yourself this primary question: am I crazy?
Oh, I hear that all the time from
women.
Is it just me? Is it just me?
Is this normal?
Yeah. I hear women
Am
say
I
that all
asking
the
for
time.
too much?
Yeah. And sometimes it's just the basic things, and you're looking at them like, that should be in every relationship. And they're asking, like, you know,
is it okay to expect a dinner and a reservation and for them to call me a week in advance and all of these things?
Yeah. Like, I think.
Tell me what to wear and how to behave and how to act. Is
oh
that
my
normal?
God. That's so funny. Like, I have this rule. If a guy wants to take charge of, like, we're dating. We're not just a few dates, but we're dating. And, like, you want to make it a surprise dinner or whatever. Not dinner, date night. I'm like, here's the deal. Just tell me I'm wearing Lululemon or jeans and a casual shirt, jeans and a sexy top, cocktail or gala. I'm good. I'm in your hands. Just, I can't stand not being dressed. And this happened to me once. Oh my gosh. So I was going on a date with somebody, just to go off topic here for a second. I was going on a date with somebody, and, you know, he told me to dress like one way, because that's my thing. Just tell me how to dress. And then he's like, well, we're going to make a pit stop. I'm like, okay, you know, going with the flow. And we walk in, and it is one of the most conservative religious groups. And I'm wearing a sheer kind of white shirt with only 2 buttons and a black bra.
You are a step away from a water contest.
It was the worst. Even if I buttoned up my shirt,
a wet t-shirt contest.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed. And of course, I knew people that were in there because this is a very prominent group. And I just looking at the 80-year-old ladies, like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Or
like,
you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, man. It's really funny because, you know, I do get DMs mostly. Most people want this as a safe place. You know, whether it's, you know, my bedroom confessionals or a podcast out there, they don't want to comment. So I get a lot of DMs. I'm really fortunate that I seriously have only gotten like a few of those, like, hey, can I buy your panties? I'm like, yeah, but I don't own any. But, you know, no, but sometimes I get these guys, like, I'm not going to say anything, but like literally a big mayor was trying to ask me out. I'm like, hello, have you seen my shit? Like, I'm not a good look for you. Or I'll get the super, 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 like, religious Orthodox people with the big hats. And I'm like, again, do you not see?
Yes,
like,
they do.
I
and
know.
that's why they're drawn to you.
But
So,
it's like,
hello.
I'm just
Yes.
like, that's kind of messed up. Like, so hypocritical. So I'm sorry, I took it off.
No, it's fine. Can I go? I'll go back for a minute
wheel
and
it
talk
back,
about how I got into this.
That's what I was going to ask. And your credentials.
Yeah.
And what you do.
Yeah, those, you know, we got to have those certificates, right? We got to have the letters. We got to have the. So I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional environment. My dad was an alcoholic, and my mom was narcissistic and borderline undiagnosed, right? You know, unwilling, because narcissist doesn't run to therapy to go, please diagnose me. What's wrong with me? Not their primary question. What's wrong with you?
It's always your problem.
What's wrong with you
Yeah,
is their
been
primary
there.
question.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I'd escaped, and I became super successful, and I became an international business consultant, and that was my first career, was building companies, taking them over when they were struggling and fixing them. I'm a big nerd. And I'm a big strategy
You're a nerd
person.
like me.
I am. I'm a big, giant nerd.
So I worked on Wall Street before turning to marketing in my career consulting firm. Like I'm like went to London School of Economics. Like I am not that. Yeah, you know, behind these pretty images, as my beautiful guest here, we got some brains packing in the room here.
But what would happen is I would go in and get these contracts, right, to turn these companies around, and I would travel all over the world, and I would march in with my, Louis Vuitton and my, pencil skirt and hold the business meeting and do all the things and be the boss. And then I would, at the end of the night, go home and binge drink or, have like 2 bottles of wine or more and then with Ativan and mix it up. And I was on a self-destruct path.
How old were you?
This was from the time I was in my early 20s until I was in my early 30s.
Wow.
Okay, so this is a decade of toxic. So what happened is I realized I'm so good at being successful where I can make it where it's certain. Money's easy.
Yeah.
Making money's easy if you have the formula and you know how to take care of yourself. Yeah. What's not certain is being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and being who you really are with somebody. And so
I think that's really hard. And that's why, again, you're here in the hot seat because women in their 50s dating, it's hard as shit. I mean, just period, between menopause and all the other issues.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to pretend. So, and I think the issue for a lot of us is instead of being who we are, we become who we think people want. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I like that.
So that's where,
like that, guys.
That's
girls.
where we get it wrong. And that's what codependency is. Codependency is a mask that we put on to be who we need to be or we think we need to be instead of who we really are.
Yeah.
And that was why codependency is at the root of all those other behaviors, binge drinking, acting crazy. So for me, it was this holy moment where I thought, I've got to heal this root. Yeah. I've got to get under the hood and see why I can't let someone love me.
So what was that like for our audience? I'm not saying that everyone is in that situation, but what was a defining moment that made you acknowledge it, own it, and say, I want to fix myself, move forward in a healthy manner? That's
a great question. For me, it was kind of like most people that had that crash. It was around 2008, 2009, when I had this big corporate Beverly Hills position and I could hide there because I looked like I was doing fine and I was making all the money and whatever, but I lost that. And, when that thing happened, like everybody was panicking, right? People were jumping off of buildings in LA. I mean, it was terrifying. Yeah. And, it was horrible. But I had to come back home to the place I'd escaped, Westover, West Virginia, in the middle of nowhere. Wow. Crawled back to my alcoholic dad's house. Wow. Pulled my Louis Vuitton bags into the beer-stained carpets and the nicotine-stained walls with the cigarette holes in the couch. And I thought, I've just spent the last decade of my life building something that wasn't real.
Wow. I mean, that is night and day.
Yeah. What am I going to do now? Who am I without, and people call that the resume, right? Who am I without my resume?
Oh, that was so me. I mean, I definitely, when I stopped working before, and I'm grateful that my late husband, I didn't have to work, but I went through a period and I was a single mom and I worked my ass off. It was either, keep going and take the promotion or you're fired and you have no job. And I'm a single mom. What choice did I do? And people would say, oh, you're going to crash, you're going to burn. I'm like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
like, hello. Like, do you have any other idea what I should do? I got to
Can you prepare the runway?
Yeah. And you know what? It did happen. Yeah. It did happen. I did crash. I took 2 weeks of mental health off from work. And I dug deep and I had to learn 9 to 5. I needed to learn boundaries. And you know what's interesting? Once I learned the boundaries and I applied them at work, guess what? If I didn't quit, I was probably going to get fired.
Yeah, well, people don't like it when you start to be who you are and stand for what you really want and need. Yeah. And for me, at the time that I was in that whole destructive thing, I was also in a long-term relationship with somebody who only wanted me when I was breaking up with him.
Oh, so what he couldn't have, he didn't want anyone else to have
you. We did that
you.
dance, right? Yeah. And I've created now, because I've dedicated my whole life to this study of these codependent toxic couple dynamics. Yeah. We were in a dynamic called the clinger withholder.
Ooh.
Where
I love all these like little sayings, you know.
Yeah, I have all these cute little.
Yeah.
They're cute. I created
Well,
a
they're not
personality
cute,
test.
but you know that's cute.
Yeah.
Which we're going to get into your personality test. So you're in this place. You're back home. Okay, what's next?
What I literally, it was all stripped away, so there was nowhere to go but inside. I couldn't run to another contract. I couldn't, pretend anymore that I wasn't lost.
Right.
And
Can
that
I ask you a
was.
question? Did you date during the time when you were like drinking?
Oh my God.
Okay. Do you
Well,
feel like
I had
you
a
made
relationship with that
Oh, that's right,
guy
you
for
did.
10 years,
Okay.
but I mean, we were always breaking up, so I had so many dates.
Okay.
I had so
Okay.
many, but it was a horrible time for me because we go on a date
Yeah.
and I was like, what do you do? And
Like
how long
that's
have
all
you been
that
doing
mattered.
that?
And that's all that
no,
mattered.
because I was in competition mode. Well, I run this big company and here's what I do and what do you do? And it was a pissing contest and I hit the wall first every time. And back in those days, there was Dr. Pat Allen. I don't know if
Okay.
you've ever heard of her, but she
No.
was like, how to make 'em marry you in 30 days and the rules.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We
yes.
consulted with her. She would come in and give talks at some of the companies that I was working at.
Okay.
And so there was a whole masculine, feminine craze, when people would talk about, well, you're not in your feminine energy. And now I understand what that really means. But back then I had no concept.
Right.
So I was deconstructing everything I thought I knew. And I knew that I had to quit binge drinking. I knew that that was one of the big things, but I knew that a regular program wasn't going to work for me because I did not resonate with like, oh, I'm going to go into an AA meeting. I don't think so.
Right.
No, I don't think so. I went into one once. It was in West Virginia. I walked in. It was in a basement of a church. They were like smoking cigarettes. There's a
Depressing.
97-year-old woman. She's like, yeah, I haven't drank for like 40 years, but every day it's a struggle. I was like, fuck that. I was like, if I have to be in this meeting 40 years trying not to drink,
Right.
I'd rather drink.
That was like when I became a widow. Everybody was like, oh, you need to go to all these widow support groups and this and that. And I'm like, I can't think of anything more depressing than keeping me down. I didn't find for me the concept of sitting around bitching and moaning, and it works for some people. So please don't, no disrespect.
Of course. If it's working, keep working it.
But just because I'm a widow doesn't mean I need a support group. Everybody wanted to throw me in a support group.
Right. So I reverse engineered my healing. And actually that's how I created toxic relationship recovery. I was willing to look back and say, how did I get here? And to think the things that I escaped, the childhood traumas, all the things that I had been through, for the first time in my life, I was strong enough to look at it.
Right.
And to say, how could this, because obviously it's impacting me.
Right.
I don't have the love of my life. I don't have the partnership that I've craved and want. I don't have lasting, deep, real friendships where I'm vulnerable and I'm myself. And I know that trauma, that relationship trauma plays out in your relationships.
Right. And
so I had to go back and unveil it.
Yeah.
And get to the bottom of it.
To interject for a second for our audience, like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. But at the same time, you need to reflect and think a little bit about what Heidi is saying. And, Heidi has a lot of knowledge on this, obviously firsthand and professionally. And I think it is a big hurdle in your 50s dating, and Heidi is in our 50s.
Thank you. I have arrived. Yeah.
She has. Welcome to
official.
Hormone Fun.
That's been happening for the last couple of years. It's a good time.
But, so we'd like to talk about the struggles in our 50s that, while dating, and that it's a safe place here and to listen or to watch. And what I'm hoping is at the end of this podcast and throughout this podcast, you are reflecting possibly about, am I healed to have a healthy relationship, or am I in a toxic relationship that's like a hamster wheel that I just don't know how to get out of and off of? So what you're talking about, and to our audience, I want you guys to tune in. I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to think about, how maybe what Heidi's talking about might relate to you. And that takes a lot of inner strength.
It does.
It takes a lot of inner
strength. It's much
strength.
easier to post on Instagram and just do the shiny stuff.
Oh, you know what?
Much easier.
My daughter just posted, she was going out to a 30th birthday party and she looks really beautiful and she posted a picture on Instagram, right? And then like 10 minutes later, she posts a picture of her in a hospital gown and she goes, reality of my life an hour ago. Wow. Don't believe all the happy things you see on Instagram.
I love
Spot
that.
on, right?
I love that. I think people are craving more authenticity now than ever. And it's hard. Let's be real. Where do we live? We live in South Florida. We live in Palm Beach, Boca, where it's the land of the pretend.
Yeah.
It
is.
So not the easiest thing.
No, and again, I always talk about I don't do the bar scene, but if I'm eating at one of those restaurants with the bar scenes, I can literally see, I'll be honest with you, a man or a woman, and it's like, toxic. You could just see it all over
Okay, what's the look?
face.
I want to know. Like, what is the look?
Sloppy fucking drunk. Okay? And the women that
There's
are just
a clue.
like, it's like they're worn. Their face is just so worn. They look sad. They look exhausted.
That could be an example of you're not ugly or just poor. I mean,
no,
maybe they need...
No, this is no.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, like you could just tell emotionally they're just.
You can see it on their face.
You can.
Yeah.
And they're like all over each other and it's the same people all the time. And it makes me so sad because like they're just there's a reason they're beyond 50 and single, some of these women, because they may not be in a mentally healthy place.
I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is how does trauma affect you? It makes you forget who you are.
Oh.
Okay. So the whole thing is not you're broken, there's something wrong with you. It's who were you before all that stuff happened to you and how do we get back to that person?
It's also what we talk about on 50's AF is women in their 50s that are all of a sudden from a divorce or being a widow is who am I? Mm-hmm. I'm no longer a mom in need of raising. I'm no longer a wife. And what I talk a lot about is dating in your 50s. Go back to remember what it was like, your confidence in dating in your 20s. Women feel deflated a lot. And so they've been gunning it all these years, raising kids, maybe dealing with a sick husband, and they don't even know because maybe they got married in their 20s.
Well, I think you're really sparking something for me as I'm sitting here listening to you, and what's playing before me is this vision of how dating is so different from every decade and why it's so important for us to arrive at the place of who we are in our 50s fucking finally.
Yeah.
Because in our 20s, we're reading the books. What do we need to wear? What do we need to talk about?
I don't know. Just fucking around and having fun.
No, I mean, or having fun or whatever. When
and
you're
I
in
wasn't
your 30s,
really. I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, but you're reading the books at some point where you're man strategizing. Okay. Yeah. And you're thinking, this is what's attractive. This is not attractive. The dance starts. We become who we're not.
Yeah.
We do whatever. And then we get in a relationship with somebody who doesn't know who we are.
Yep.
Because we don't know who we are.
Nope.
So I think the best dating advice I could ever give is truly get to know yourself like you're dating yourself at this new era of your life and then show up as that woman no matter what venue you're in. You know, I hang out in some I'm lucky. I have some friends that have made different, elevation points in their lives, right? So I get exposed to a lot of different things. And I remember, so a couple of times being in these environments where we're like, hey, we want to be surrounded by wealth or nice environments, or we want to meet somebody who can provide or meet us, But all of a sudden they get in these environments and they're like the pinkies up and they're sipping and they're trying to they're a robot trying to be instead of just being themselves, authentically raw, transparent. And you know how much somebody appreciates that? You're like a breath of fresh air. Be a breath of fresh air.
I like that.
Be yourself, where somebody look at you going, wow, I can't believe, you're saying, well, are you kidding? How, I'm too much for you. Never.
Yeah.
Never.
No. There was a saying is if I'm too much for you, then go low.
Find less.
Go find less.
Go find less.
Yeah, that was on my pillow from Valentine's Day. I actually had that on one of the pillows. I did. So yeah. Let me ask you a question though. Because you started talking about it. How does one not put their past toxic hurt onto a future relationship? And what I mean by that is a trigger. Okay, I'm sure you're all over this. So you're in a relationship, and ladies, I think we all maybe have done this if you're divorced, especially, or a widow, meaning like you're dating somebody and they do the slightest little thing undeservingly, and it's a trigger for you because you didn't deal with it in your past. So how do you address people how do you get them to identify, hey, you're punishing this person for your past?
Right. This is a great question. And it's really complex. Because on the one hand, we would have advice that would say, well, heal that trigger. Right. Go back, figure out what the trigger is, go back and do the origin work so that you can move forward in your life and not be triggered anymore. But I have a radical way of looking at that. I think that if you are being triggered up in your current relationship, and a trigger is just a trauma bond. It's a feeling, an old familiar feeling. That felt like when mom rejected me. That I feel like when I was invisible to dad. I feel like I'm unimportant. Pay attention, because that's your exit sign.
So my trigger...
That's not learn how to tolerate it. That's not heal it so you can put up with it. That's get out of Dodge.
Well, my trigger...
Okay. Let's get personal.
My trigger that I got and displaced on a relationship was if you raise your voice. Okay? So happened once, and I kept it to myself, and I immediately, like literally, physically, my shoulders went down. Okay? And second time it happened, I was like, okay, this is not good, right? So I started talking to my therapist about it, and I started talking to my best friends, which also, people talk, if you're lucky to have an inner circle of trust, feel free to lean and talk to your people in your inner circle.
Well, especially later in life, we realize women are where it's at. We should be on a commune, just supporting one another. I don't even
jealousy.
know. I mean.
Yeah. No. So like I opened up to my therapist. I'm like, I'm very self-aware. And I said, this is happening. And, it's a big trigger, and I know why it's a trigger, but I don't know how to stop it. It was a trigger from my first marriage. He was emotionally abusive. And so this person didn't deserve, because it took my best friends who have been married 45 plus years.
But was this person raising their voice?
Oh, no, it was.
In a bad way?
Yeah.
Yeah, so why would you want to learn how to be in that?
This is the thing.
That was your GPS. Your trigger is your GPS. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Well, it eventually did happen. But,
I hope your therapist didn't say, well, let's do some EMDR so that you can go back and he can yell at you and you can handle it.
No, but what she did teach me for the first time, I only thought there were red flags and green flags. I didn't know this thing about yellow flags. And you can, go on and talk about that. So she taught me, like, okay, it's happened 2 times in all the time you've been together. It may be a yellow flag. Now sit down and talk to him and tell him how it made you feel. If he doesn't own it and make sure he doesn't do it, and the two of you have, whether it's like a, hey, giving you like, a safe word, like that you're hitting a point.
Didgeridoo.
Yeah. So, and my best friends would say, Nicole, come on, listen, we've been married 40 years. You don't think we get into a fight once in a while? So it was that balance of, is it a trigger that is a red flag, or is it yellow and like, hey, all relationships, because my late husband and I never raised our voice to each other, and that was 17 years. So going back to that time, obviously, was triggered never until that moment of dating this person.
And I think that was a huge red flag.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Huge. I mean, when I first started dating my husband, he grew up like an angsty teenager. Okay. He was like a frustrated musician. He's a rock star. He's like got all this, a lot of energy. And we first started dating, and he got upset about something and ended up like raising his voice, and then he got mad and he like hit something. He hit the wall.
Ooh.
Okay. So I told him, I said, I love you, and non-negotiable for me. Deal breaker. I said,
love it.
Voice raises, punching things. I said, if you need to take a walk, if you need to go to the gym, I don't expect you not to ever be upset or mad, but those are 2 things that can't happen around me because I'm an abuse survivor. Yeah. I was an abused kid.
And he took it.
So I can't. So that's how when you give somebody the chance and they go, oh my God, you know what? I need to work on that. You're right. And they do. But if you tell them and they continue on, you got to get out of there.
Yeah. So that obviously hit the road.
Yeah.
So basically also, I'm doing a Q&A here with Heidi, and of course we're going to run low on time here. So what else is new on 50s AF? You know, I always have a great guest that we could keep going on.
It's because we have good minds in our 50s and we know how to use them.
Oh, no, I talk about that all the time, that how powerful women in their 50s, especially dating, need to acknowledge and not feel deflated, because who wants to be 20, 30 again? I'm not starting over. This is a great decade for your forever life, and it's you time.
That's right.
It's you time. So how would you answer, like, giving advice about how not to repeat the toxic hamster wheel is what I call it, repeating the same mistakes, and how to break the cycle?
You said it. That's exactly what it is. It's knowing you're in a cycle. And awareness, I sound like a after-school special. Awareness is the first step. But it really is. So I think for most people, it's a curiosity of what pattern am I running. It's hard because, like you said earlier, it's much easier to look at that guy and go, that's an asshole, that's an asshole. Well, it's different, you know.
At some point, you're in the center of it.
Exactly.
At some point, I would say, if you're at the center pointing your finger to everyone else, you need to be pointing it at yourself.
Yeah, we all do. It was my holy moment too, you know. But it's such a powerful place to be in.
Yep.
Truth is the most powerful liberator on the planet. So you could shine the truth and go, okay, where's my blind spot?
Yeah.
So doing the work, and then I have a process. I have a system that I invented because I'm a nerd, called the rapid detachment method.
Ooh.
That helps you identify what pattern you're in, and then I systematically break you free from that in 7 steps.
Oh, I love that.
So we have retreats, we have workshops, because it shouldn't take forever. No offense to therapy. Therapy is a great place to get emotional support, but I'm a coach.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, my credentials are in coaching, my training is in coaching, my mentorship is in coaching, in addiction and codependency in particular. But I want a result. I move people from point A to point B. And I don't want you to get, like, we're 50, we don't have a lot of time. So how long is it going to take? Not long if you have the right process.
No, I know. I remember once my somebody I knew was in therapy for like 2 years, and I'm flipping the bill for it, and like they weren't getting any movement. I hate therapists that do that. I really do. A good therapist,
Job security.
Yeah, but a good therapist is like, let's get this in and out.
A good therapist is here's a good motto, right? So you know if you're a good person or not. A good therapist is always working themselves out of a job.
Oh.
A good therapist,
I agree,
is always working themselves out of a job because they want you to become fully, full agency of yourself, fully functioning, trusting your own judgment. And if at some point they turn into a confidant or a friend, that's what a priest is for. That's what a best friend is for. That's not, that's what your pastor is for. That's not what you pay somebody to do.
A lot of people
pay people for change, not comfort necessarily.
If you're not seeing movement through therapy, you need to kind of like think that through, because your therapist shouldn't be just the person that you vent to once a week.
That's your best friend.
Yeah.
Your best friend is where you vent.
Exactly.
Your therapy is where you go to change.
So I have another question.
What's not working? Change it, not yourself.
Yeah. So let me ask another. Oh, I read the time wrong. We have plenty of time. I thought I was rushing, so I apologize. They just fixed the timer. So anyway, I want to know, and this is a big one for me, okay?
Yes.
How do you become vulnerable in this decade of dating? Like, if you've had a toxic relationship in your past and you've healed, okay, part of that process, I think, is putting up a wall, because I'm not going to go back there. I am not going to be treated there. Like, I know I have the biggest, and I'm very upfront about it, I have the biggest, thickest wall, and my key is like a chastity belt to my fucking heart. Like, it takes a lot, because, I think some people, like, I did come through my toxic relationships, and I know this is not for everybody. But I did not die on that sword and say, woe is me. I said, I naturally somehow knew to have my own values and cores and, how I wanted to be as a parent. And basically it was easy. I just did everything the opposite that my parents did. But I also was very aware of it. It wasn't like I wasn't aware of it. I knew it was. It wasn't hard work. It was just, I was true to my values, true to my morals. And people would say, like, where the fuck did you get them from? I don't know. I didn't have any mentors. I can't even tell you. But I never felt the urge to say, like, oh, woe was me. I
Well,
grew up with this.
but it did create some walls.
It did, and that's where I'm.
So
I'm bringing
that's
that where I have trouble being vulnerable.
Right.
So how do you coach people that they work through it, and now they're like, I imagine they build up some walls, but at some point they got to be vulnerable.
I'm gonna say something that might not be,
There's nothing you can't say.
But so and that's me being codependent, trying to create the landing strip here. But I think that if we still have walls, we haven't healed, because walls are for protection for people that are afraid, and you're afraid of something because it's unhealed. So love has no fear. Fear is fear and love is love. So if there's a fear element, it's not love.
Right.
So it needs a little more work. So, the walls, and Rumi said that so brilliantly, that your task is not to seek for love, it's to seek within the barriers that you've built against it.
Oh my gosh. Can you say that one more time?
I didn't say it perfectly, but
It's okay.
Rumi said your task is not to seek for love, it's to seek within the barriers you've built against it. Because love is available. It's there. So, and I have to say, this is what the scary thing is to say. If you are if you're tracking a man and he knows this about you, that you have walls and you have you're a complex lock and you got 14 numbers, and to tell you, the only man right now that is going to be attracted to that and go full tilt bookie there is a man with an inferiority complex.
Oh, wait.
Why
is that?
Because he sees the walls as a challenge to prove himself.
Oh, you know what? That makes so much sense, because the long-term relationship I had after being a widow, all he was constantly doing is let your wall down. Trust in me, trust in me, trust in me, trust in me. Over and over.
And then when you do, they leave because the conquest is over. Okay?
Excuse me, yes.
So you're a project for them. You're not a partner.
Interesting.
They say, oh, you're so beautiful. You're so lovely. I want to get in there. And as soon as they get in, the fun's over.
So that might explain, ladies, if you're in a relationship and you think things are going well and the guy dips out, it could be this scenario.
It's the scenario. You're the withholder in that case.
Yeah.
And as soon as he clings and gets in, then he becomes the withholder.
And then it goes back into that hamster wheel of repeating, because you don't know what was wrong, and then your wall gets higher.
Right. And then you pick another one who's got a bigger complex.
Yeah.
And now he's the savior, and he's going to come in and break down your walls. So what is healing? How do you not repeat that vulnerability is you trust in yourself that no matter who presents in front of you, you're safe. They can be themselves. They can fuck it up. They can do whatever they're going to do, but you don't need a wall to protect yourself.
Well, I often say on my podcast, I keep it real. And even if that means putting myself on a platter, which is what I'm doing here. So what Heidi's talking about, because we spoke about it, I definitely have my walls. And honestly, it's something that I hate, but they exist. Just because everyone's fucked me over. And that was close to me.
The process is an easy process. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's to go back and say, how do I resolve that? Because here's what happens. You have a moment where everybody in your life has fucked you over. Right. They've taken advantage. They've done something hurtful. They haven't been kind to you. Samesies. Me too. Hashtag me too.
Okay. Hashtag. I love that.
So
hashtag soul sisters in a bad way, but okay.
But for me, it's been a process of finding out what the root lie that was instilled in me as a result of all that trauma. Because I thought I was fine and I escaped and I'm confident, I have everything going. But when the lights were out and nobody was listening and the phone wasn't ringing and people weren't being kind, I'd go back to that belief that was resulted from so much trauma, which is, you know what, there must be something wrong with me underneath of it all.
Right.
And so we have to uncover that lie and install a new truth. So that's how retelling trauma isn't useful. Revisiting in therapy, all the traumas isn't useful. It's not. What's useful is, what is the system, the operating system that was installed in you as a result of your trauma? That's what I'm interested in. Not what happened to you, but what did it do to you?
Because I've had, same family psychiatrist since my kids were in second grade, because they have ADD and ADHD. I know half the world. But it takes a drugstore to put my brain to sleep at night. So, because I have a million voices. And, he actually said to me, whoa, you know what, don't dive into this, because you've learned to move on and survive and do all this. Sometimes there is a defining moment, maybe you understand this more, is that he said sometimes you just don't go back. It's sometimes hurtful to go back and nothing good can come of it. So what's the difference there?
You have to be able, so I invented this process whenever I was working at a drug and alcohol treatment center. It's a weird story how I ended up there. My husband was working for Tony Robbins at the time. We were traveling on the road doing Tony Robbins seminars and all these things. And we got recruited to teach a personal development model inside of a treatment center. I only had people for 30, 60, or 90 days there. That's it. And they needed to transform their trauma and their beliefs about themselves because they were in self-destruct mode, self-sabotage mode.
Oh.
So that's what we're all in. Some of us self-sabotage a little worse than others.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of us spend too much money. Some of us get on heroin. Okay.
Right.
So I realized, okay, I've got to be able to, if I open up a wound, I have to be able to systematically know how to close that wound within a good time frame so that we're not pouring salt and digging in, and it takes skill. And the process was revealed to me through thousands of clients. And I would do the process every day in front of groups of 100 people at a time and have interventions and have somebody come up. And so I tweaked the RDM, rapid detachment method, inside of the treatment center for 8 years, almost 10 years really, that I perfected the process. So I agree it can be painful to go back in the wrong hands. It can definitely open up some wounds, but if you have this process and a skilled practitioner to walk you through, I think it's empowering.
And I think
and uplifting and life-changing.
Right. And we're starting to run out of time as usual. And so what I do want Heidi to touch on is that you're not defined by your toxic relationships. What we're saying is, you do have to be vulnerable within yourself. You do have to do a reality check-in. If you are always one of those people going, it's his fault, and there's a circle of people and other friends, you know what? It's not always everyone else's fault. You got to look within. And until you can heal yourself, honestly, I don't think you're ready to be open for a healthy, loving relationship.
Well, yeah, and let's say this, healed or, totally yourself, accepting and loving of all parts of you, come to terms, aren't pretending at all to be anything other than exactly who you are, no matter what environment you're in. Now there's grace, obviously, for and manners, but just not being afraid to be who you are all the time.
Yeah.
And for fear of repercussions or you're apologizing for how you are or what you do, we don't need to do that. I mean, it is what it is. I am who I am.
Right.
And I'm self-aware of that. But I also understand that I have darkness and light. Right. And I've got to learn how to go into the dark and bring those things to the light so that I can be more myself. And trauma doesn't define you. A lot of people say, hey, I am who I am because of the trauma.
Yes.
I'm such a survivor because I got beaten as a child. That's the craziest thing. It's the worst thing to tell a trauma survivor. The truth is you are who you are in spite of your trauma.
Right.
But there are things that your trauma tried to take from you that you need to go back and reclaim.
Yeah, I
your confidence, your belief in yourself.
Yeah. So for me, it's called survival mode.
Yeah.
And that is me. I am not ashamed of that. And I wear that with a badge, I guess, of honor because I don't know any different. And,
I know. So you know what? And that's so many people that I work with say the same thing. So our motto is, I know how to paddle Shit Creek. Yeah. I know the directions. Yeah. I have the way. I have the boat. I have everything we need. I know how to be in a shitstorm. So the question for us isn't how bad can you stand it and when to get out of bad. It's actually how good can you let it get.
Yes. And so I will be honest, I've had this, it took me 2 years from being a widow to where I am today. It wasn't easy shit, okay? And someone sees me and they think, oh, she has all her shit together. You know what? I had to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And part of that is preparing myself to go into a healthy relationship. And I'm finding once I did that, with all this that I've said about myself, that communication in a relationship is so key. I was about to dip out on someone in a relationship. And instead of just doing that, I asked for a FaceTime and we discussed what was wrong. And guess what? I had it so wrong. I misunderstood him. And I realized I was displacing something from my past onto him that he didn't deserve.
That's
and it was
powerful.
a trigger. Right. So guess what? we continue dating in a healthy manner.
That's powerful.
So I think that's like one step that, you know, communication, through communication, don't lower your standards. What I'm saying is, if you feel that all of a sudden that somebody does, don't ignore it. That's a red flag. But like, open up, understand why you're feeling that in that moment, but also open up the communication with the other person you're with in that moment.
Give them an opportunity to change.
Give them an opportunity.
Yeah, like I haven't, you know, my husband knows my trauma comes with me. That's a packaged thing. And
right.
And I communicate with him when I'm being triggered. It has nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you do that is you work with somebody to help you get self-aware.
Yeah.
So you understand how to communicate who you are to another human being.
Yeah. So communication, whether it's a healthy relationship or you have a bad past, either way, I think communication is the number one thing, and it's such a lost art in this state of social media.
We have no idea how to do it.
And that's why like people give me pushback. Yes, I'm old fashioned, and yes, my approach to dating is texting, talking, and FaceTime before you go on that date, because the chemistry comes last in this day and age, where back in the day when we dated in our 20s and 30s, you met organically, you know, at a party. Ooh, he's hot. Oh, she, Now it's the last thing. So if you don't have the art of communication, meaning men, and I've said this a million times, if you send me a wink or emoji, fuck off, I'm not going to answer you. A real man can put two sentences together. And if you just wink and whatever at me, I'm not going on a date with you. I can't stand these men that like give a wink and, hey, you want to get a drink? Why? Because you like my pictures? You don't know anything about me. Well, with that all said, you know, we have to close out. And as always, when I have a guest like Heidi, everything Heidi will be listed under guest resources. And it's not often that I tape and drop in the same week. So I can say today is Thursday and this podcast is dropping on Tuesday. So the date you hear it, know that we just did this Thursday. And, you know, as always, check out, stay, subscribe, listen, watch 50safpodcast.com. And again, everything about Heidi is going to be on my website. But Heidi, do you want to just give a last little?
Well, I created something special just for your listeners. Ooh. So if they're interested in learning more about how to recover, I have a course that is a self-study course, and it's on my site at HeidiRain.com. And if they use the code Nicole at the checkout, NICOLE, if they use Nicole, they will get 20% off.
That is so nice.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, I really do hope that you take away from this. We ran over time, and I want you to check out Heidi's guest resources, because that is huge what she just did. And again, I can't even put it into a few sentences, the wealth of knowledge. All I can say is, might see Heidi again. So Heidi, please, thank you so much for participating on the podcast. And thank you for helping so many people out there.
Oh, thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. Nicole Chanis, your host with the mostest, signing off. 50's AF Podcast. Always tune in, check us out, listen, watch, whatever you're comfortable with. Bye.